Accrued Redemption from the Garden of Salvation raid. Biting Winds, which is from Varix on Europa. As for our only solar bow in the game right now, we have the Tyranny of Heaven from Last Wish. As for the best and easiest to farm Void bow, which you can get from Umbral engrams in the Helm, we have the Imperial Needle. The easiest arc bow to farm of all time compared to any of the other ones is definitely WOLFTONE Draw, which can get fantastic perks, especially Harmony, which works great with other weapons. You can farm this from Umbral engrams in the Helm as well. Now we're going to go into the exotics, and we've got the Trinity Ghoul, which does arc damage and is great for ad clear, but only ad clear. Then we have the Layman Arc, which is by far the best overload weapon in the game. Works better than any overload hand cannon, any overload sword, anything else, whatever. Layman Arc and its poison effect are great. I'm only going to talk about 2 pulse rifles because I really don't believe that overload pulse rifle is going to be very good this season, but any messenger with Desperado is going to be great, especially now that you can get heating up and you can get encore in that first slot. And of course we have bad JUJU, which does take up an exotic slot, but if you're using fusion rifles in each slot, that typically should be fine, as this will help you get your super back ridiculously fast. For auto rifles in the kinetic slot, we're going to start out with the 7th SERAPH Carbine, which is absolutely annoying to try and get nowadays. It is a world drop, but it can roll with 4th times the charm and Vorpal. And then we've got CHROMA Rush, which is from last season. You can target farm this one in the Helm. As far as energy weapons go, we've got the Reckless Oracle, which does void damage and is from the Garden of Salvation raid. And as far as Adept ones go, we've got the Arc for 50 RPM Shadow Price, which can roll Overflow and Dragonfly, which is really nice. You can throw that Adept Big One spec on there. And then as far as Solar Adept energy auto rifles go, we've got the Adept Summoner, which is very rare to obtain, unfortunately, but if you do happen to have one, you can throw Adept Big One spec on there. Alright, so there are a decent amount of energy fusion rifles that we are going to recommend. The first one's going to be the IOTA DRACONIS. It can roll with things like high impact reserves, and it's target farmable from Umbral engrams in the Helm. It is a high impact frame, so it does have that really high charge time, but it's got massive impact. As far as arc weapons go, with Adept variants I might add, we have the EXILE'S Curse from Trials of Osiris. It's a high impact frame, just like the aforementioned IOTA DRACONIS, and it has ridiculously high impact, higher than any arc fusion rifle that's available right now. And if you happen to get an Adept variant, throw Adept charge time on there, something like Under Pressure or Kickstart going, this thing's going to be really nice. You can also throw on Adept Big One spec for added damage to major, and then take all that, but basically say from strikes instead of from trials, and you've got the plug one. On another more easy to get note, I guess, we've got the Cartesian coordinate. I actually don't believe you can target farm this. It is a world drop, but it has very common drop rates. Speaking of rapid fire frames, we have my all-time favorite, the NULL Composure. This thing was available last season as the ritual weapon, I think they're calling them now. You can throw boss spec or major spec on this thing and cause it to do major DPS, though. It's such a fun weapon to use. And then in the exotic slot, as far as fusion rifles go, we've got the 1KV, 1000 Voices. This thing does have the highest DPS out of any weapon in the game right now. It stacks perfectly with Particle Deconstructor. Would definitely recommend using this thing in GMs for DPS. In the linear fusion rifle slot, we've got the Lorenz Driver, which is an energy linear fusion rifle, which happens to be the only one available right now. We've also got the Sleeper Stimulant, which I would only recommend using over 1K Voices if you have the Catalyst, as it increases ammo reserves and speeds up the charge time. Then we've got Vex MYTHOCLASTO, which I know some people still don't have yet, which is very frustrating. We've got the Reed's Regret, which can roll with things like Triple Tap and Clown Cartridge, and Firing Line and Vorpal. If you have an Adept version, you can throw on Adept Big One spec and have it do even more damage to majors after you stun them, and bosses for DPS. Another Adept weapon from Trials that you would definitely want to have would be the SOLA'S Scar, which is a caster frame sword, which can roll with Vorpal, and if you throw a Adept Big One spec on there, it'll do so much damage to majors and to bosses, and you can actually use this with Overload Sword. Alright, we're really quickly going to go over some mods that you guys are definitely going to want to have on, depending on what builds you're running in GMs this season, but Power Preservation is a really good one, where your super final blows create extra orbs of power for your allies. This is extremely useful. Another good one you'd want to look into is Grenade Kickstart if you're a Warlock running Stasis turrets especially, as when you throw your grenade and the energy is fully expended, you will gain grenade energy back instantly. Melee Kickstart is also one that you would want to look into, especially if you're a Hunter running Stasis. For chest mods, you typically want to run Concussive Dampener and or Sniper Resistance, but this season Stasis Resistance is finally in the game, and it's definitely something worth looking into given all the new enemies that can use Stasis powers in the strikes. Other mods to look at would be the holster mods, especially for LFRs, because you could rock something like Reeds or Threaded Needle with Lorentz, and you could just swap between the two instead of ever having to reload during DPS phases. More mods that you obviously would want to have would be Taking Charge, High Energy Fire, Powerful Friends is a good one, Blast Radius. Firepower is also great for Warlocks running Stasis turret builds. Protective Light and Stacks on Stacks are great as well, as Stacks on Stacks would benefit you for using Protective Light, and it would also help with other mods where you need Charged with Light. Ore Mine Cell mods are also great, especially if you're running the 7th SERAPH Carbine. Lucent Blade is good if you happen to be running an Overload Sword, and Argent Ordnance is great if you happen to be rocking a rocket launcher, so if you really want to use Ascendancy that bad, you can throw that thing on. Charge Harvester is nice as well. Ada's been selling this a couple of times lately, and it's definitely worth getting. I know I already made a video on it, but I'm definitely begging you guys to check this thing out. It's so great. And then one last mod that should be taken into consideration is Transcendent Blessing, which you can get by doing Queen's Bounties in the Dreaming City. It can only be put on one piece of armor at a time. However, when you dismantle the armor, you will get the mod back, but this causes you to deal more damage to all targets in the Dreaming City, so this will be especially useful during the Corrupted Strike. And the Queen's Bounties look like this. They're not very difficult to complete. Ironically, I have to do the Corrupted for this one in order to get another stack of Transcendent Blessing, but I'm totally fine with that. Lastly, I'm going to go over some exotics that you're definitely going to want to run if you're a Warlock, especially running Stasis turrets. Eye of Another World is fantastic. Necrotic Grip is very nice as well. And another pair that you might want to run is probably Aeon Soul, as that benefits everybody. And then lastly, Mantle of Battle Harmony is something that works very well, especially if you're going to run something like Reeds, or honestly if you want to try and give Aegir's Scepter a shot. For Hunter, however, something like Assassin's Cowl would be great for someone who can't stop running outside of cover and keeps getting themselves killed. Definitely wouldn't have any idea what that's like. Celestial Nighthawk is always reliable. Mask of Bakris wouldn't be bad if you happen to be someone running Stasis as well as an Arc Fusion Rifle. Aeon Swifts are always reliable. Shards of Galanor are great as well, and then other things you could consider running would be Star Eater Scales, and Omnioculus is always going to be quite useful as well. For Titan, on the other hand, you're going to want to run either Aeon Safes or Ursa Furiosas. Actium Warrig would not be bad for your anti-barrier auto rifles as well. Cuirass of the Falling Star is great for DPS, especially if you have someone running either Stasis turrets or Silence and Squall on your fire team. And then Path of the Burning Steps is going to be quite useful as well in some of those strikes where those Stasis-wielding enemies are just giving you too much shit. But that should be all for now, and if there's a Warlock exotic that you're wondering why I didn't mention it, I'm having another video on that tomorrow, because it got a little bit of a rework this season that kind of made it dog shit. So if you liked this video or found it helpful, be sure to like and subscribe. I'll do more stuff like this throughout the season.